heart of Europe, whose lives count for nothing.
He put a gun to my head and said, "I'm going to shoot you." He took my cell phone and smashed it. "I'll throw you away," he said, "and no one will remember you. You never existed."
They wanted to escape poverty. Instead, they fell prey to sex traffickers.
I resisted and cried and told him I didn't want to do that. Then came the threats and the brutality. He said he'd tell everything to my family too.
Sold into slavery, treated as a commodity, they sell sex for less than a pack of cigarettes.
Some women in our district are so poor they charge just €4 for sex.
Germany is seen by many as Europe's brothel. We meet a woman who's looking to change that. Julia Vega is a lifeline to them. Sascha and Ellie escaped out of sex slavery thanks to her help. They're both from Bulgaria. They grew up in impoverished conditions in the countryside and each fell in love with a man who promised them a life in wealthy Germany. It was only when Sascha arrived here that she realized she'd have to do sex work.
Obviously, I refused. But he threatened to kill me and said no one would know where I was. He held me captive for 2 or 3 days, and then he put me to work. I'm convinced now that he had actually planned it all along. But when you're in love, you're just blind to everything else and you don't realize it.
The boyfriend model is a common method used by sex traffickers. Once they've got control over the woman, they beat her into submission.
I had to serve at least 15 or 20 clients a day. So you can reckon around €50 per client. But at the end of the month, I was only given €200 or €300. He took everything else. Everything.
20 clients a day, 20 men that she was forced to have sex with every day. An unimaginable trauma.
As soon as the man comes into the room, you switch your brain off. In the sense that you're not there when it happens, in those 15 to 20 minutes. Just like that. You're not there in that place. It's like a protection for your mind.
Sascha has a 1-year-old child, and Ellie supports her younger siblings back in Bulgaria. Both now have cleaning jobs. Money is tight, but at least they're no longer in sex work. They say without Julia, they would never have escaped. Amalie is an advice and support center for women in sex work in the city of Mannheim. It runs on public funds and private donations. Julia Vega set it up herself 7 years ago. At the time, she faced stiff opposition because sex workers in Germany don't have lobby groups to represent their interests.
At first, there were very few people who saw any point in Amalie. Many couldn't understand why sex workers would need help. I think people are more willing to part with their money when it's for children or animals in distress.
Amalie gives out food, assists women in dealing with the authorities, arranges emergency accommodation, and helps those who want to exit the sex trade. Sandra comes here nearly every day. She loves to cook. Today, she's preparing a dish from her homeland, Jamaica. Here, she feels accepted.
Since the first day I walked in here, and I arrived with plastic bags and had nowhere to go. Ever since then, it's been like a miracle, honestly. They take you in here and treat you like you're nothing other than the person that you are.
Out on the street, she says men only see one thing in her, a hooker. Sandra herself was born out of rape. She was conceived when her own grandfather abused her mother. Later, he raped Sandra too.
When a person is raped, their soul is raped too. I struggled with myself for a long time, whether I was good enough to be loved or whether I was only here for this one thing. Because I get to know people, but then they use me. And so it always feels like prostitution again.
Wolfgang Heide is a gynecologist from the neighboring city of Heidelberg. He works for Amalie once a week on a voluntary basis. Sandra only does sex work occasionally now, when she's especially short of money. She asks Wolfgang Heide to give her a routine checkup. Everything's fine. That's quite unusual. Wolfgang Heide says many of the sex workers he sees suffer from bleeding, pain and infections, and then there are the emotional wounds.
These women are very wounded. They're carrying a huge burden. Even if they appear normal and greet you cheerfully, there's a part of them that's deeply sad. They suffer lifelong nightmares. It's like something's broken inside. They're no longer willing to commit to a relationship. They don't trust anyone, and certainly not men. It's a destruction of the female soul.
He believes it's not just the sex traffickers who are to blame, but also those who pay for the women's services.
I think you have to approach the clients so that they realize what they're doing. That if they go to these places, they think about the emotional wrecks they leave behind. These women aren't machines. It's not just a bit of fun. You're inflicting damage. And it's not voluntary. They're basically allowing themselves to be raped for money.
The Mannheim district of Neckarstadt West is home to 23,000 people from 160 nations. Many of them would prefer to leave. There are hardly any jobs, many apartments are run down and overpriced. Sex work is actually banned in this district, but it still goes on. Julia Vega spends a lot of time out in the neighborhood seeking to win the women's trust, but it's not easy.
They have certain preconceptions from their home countries, like that you have to bribe the police, that the police won't help you. They're also not familiar with social work, so it's very difficult. It can sometimes take months or even years for a woman to develop trust in us and really believe, I can trust Amalie, they will help me.
Hi. Hi. Dürfen wir reinkommen?
Ja, ja.
Sedat Chakir runs a cafe in the neighborhood. He trusts Julia and the work she does. He's known this area for 40 years. But when his daughter was born, he moved his home elsewhere. He says a year ago someone was murdered right outside his cafe, and the sex work has continued despite the ban for this district.
I think it's all just a bit more private now. In the past, it was official. Now they do it illegally. That's the only difference. Business as usual. It's all still possible, whether out on the street or in hotels or private apartments. No problem.
But the coronavirus pandemic has made a difference. A few streets further on, Mannheim's red light district feels like a ghost town. All the brothels have been forced to close. Some owners are taking the opportunity to renovate. There are also fewer clients available for the women held in slavery, so many pimps have trafficked them back to their home countries. Such as Romania. Here, prices are lower than in Germany, but the sex trade has been less impacted by the pandemic. Sex work is illegal here, but many police officers just look the other way or even earn from the trade themselves. Romania is one of the most corrupt countries in Europe. But here too there are people and organizations committed to helping the women. Aras, for example, gives out face masks, tampons and condoms. Mirella has come to stock up. She's afraid of getting COVID-19. She says many clients still insist on having unprotected sex. Mirella is 32. She tells us she's been doing this job for 10 years, every day and every evening.
I just can't find a job anywhere. I've tried to find employment, but it's useless. Come to an interview, they say. We'll call you tomorrow. We'll get back to you. But they never do. I'm still on the street. I have nothing to live on otherwise. I have to pay rent and other necessities, food, clothes. There's no way out for me. I have no other income.
No alternative to sex work. Dan Popescu from Aras says poverty amongst women is a much bigger problem here in Romania than in Western Europe. And if the women get sent back here, there's no one to help them because sex work is still a taboo in Romania, he says.
The European Union needs to take action to support the victims. If they get sent home, they land right back in the place they left to escape poverty. After all, they didn't leave because things were okay. So, they'll go to countries where sex work is better paid, like Germany, Switzerland, Belgium, or France, or wherever their pimp takes them. Where there's demand for their services, an opportunity to carry them out.
60% of sex workers in Europe come from Romania and Bulgaria, and nearly half of them are minors. Liliana was still a child when she fell into the hands of a sex trafficker. Her mother started a new relationship and gave her to a man who offered her and other girls to people traffickers.
The pimp lined us up in the middle of the street. There were 13 or 14 of us, I don't remember exactly. We stood there like chickens. And he asked the guy, "Which one do you want?" And the other guy pointed to me. I was a minor. They thought I was about 17, but I wasn't even 14. He had a passport made for me with my signature, although it would have needed my parents' signature. I was taken to Italy.
She was passed from one country to another, Italy, Hungary, Romania, years of horror.
There were many terrible moments. The worst moment was when a gun was put to my head. But it was equally awful when I was left alone, when no one would have given a cent for me, when I was beaten, when I went to bed and then woke up being beaten, and when all those dirty pigs were allowed to touch me. I don't know what was worst in my life, but at the same time, all these experiences have made me stronger, because I'm a human being with dignity. I hold my head high and I won't bow to anyone.
In the end, Liliana was freed by the police and found a place to live here at Generati Tanara, or the Young Generation. It's a refuge that was set up by Mariana Petersel 20 years ago, offering protection and a way out for sex slaves. She tries to help them build a new life.
It's very, very difficult for these girls. They try to start a normal life, but they still carry a sense of shame, like a stamp on their lives that says they were sold. They still think, I'm a prostitute, or I'm this or that. It's been said to them so often, and they've been shamed and humiliated so many times, that they believe it themselves, even though none of the things that happened to them were their fault.
She gets almost no support from the Romanian government, but she is getting help from an unexpected source in Germany.
There's a former police chief who's now retired. While in office, he worked with our assistance program, and he also encouraged others to help us. And he still calls us every now and then to find out how things are going.
That police chief is Manfred Paulus. Even though he's retired, he still travels to Romania regularly to raise awareness of how sex work is often driven by poverty. Today he's meeting with Julia Vega from Amali and Marietta Hagenay from the human rights group Solvodi. They discuss their experiences and plan new projects both in Germany and abroad. After all, sex trafficking is a European problem.
Since 2015, we've been going to Eastern Europe every year to spend a week traveling around schools and educating the children on what life is like in the Golden West, and in Germany in particular. When we asked the students at the beginning how many of them would like to go to Germany, Switzerland, or Austria once they finish school, 70% raised their hand.
And that's exactly what organized crime networks exploit, people's willingness to migrate to escape poverty and a lack of prospects.
I met one woman who admitted to me in complete shock that she didn't know how terrible things are. She said, "I thought because sex work is legal in Germany, it can't be anything terrible." But the reality was very different. She was brutally raped repeatedly and then told what she had to do.
They're caught in this red light subculture, much of which is criminal, and other laws apply. It's very much like the mafia. If you betray them, it's considered the worst of all crimes. So to tell others that you're not doing sex work willingly, but were forced into it, is one of the worst forms of betrayal. That's why when you ask them, they're all in the job voluntarily. They insist on it vehemently.
He says 90% of sex workers in Germany are forced into the trade. Because the law defines sex work as a voluntary service, it's not a criminal act. Manfred Paulus says that makes it difficult to track down and prosecute those behind the human trafficking. He says people in Romania and Bulgaria can't understand Germany's approach.
In all these recruiting countries, people are now very aware of what happens to the women and girls here in Germany under the rule of law. They look at it with amazement, if not contempt. And I don't think we can afford to continue this way long term, and neither should we.
Germany is seen as a paradise for pimps and sex traffickers. Julia Vega and the others here hope to counteract that by doing prevention work and raising awareness through posters like this one, for example.
This was done by students at a school, both boys and girls, I think. It's great that you've brought it along. Maybe it's an option for Mannheim, too.
Female students wrote "not for sale" across their own foreheads to draw attention to the problem of sex slavery and to show solidarity with girls their age in Romania and Bulgaria. The plan is to hang the posters on building site advertising boards. Manfred Paulus normally visits Romanian police officer Adrian Vladoiu, but because of the pandemic, an online meeting must suffice. They've been meeting for years and have become friends, and that's even though they need a translator to communicate.
Have a lot of women come back to Romania from Germany? The brothels here have all had to close.
Yes, they've come back, but they haven't been registered, so there are no statistics. They don't know exactly how many have returned, but they can see that the number of sex workers on the streets has increased in Romania.
Inspector Adrian Vladoiu works for the National Agency Against Human Trafficking in Brasov. The agency helps victims of trafficking to press charges and puts them in contact with aid groups. He too believes the German system makes life easier for the traffickers.
Germany is a special case because sex work is legal there. As a result, many of these girls appear to be pursuing legal employment, even though they're actually victims of human trafficking. But on the face of it, they're employees of a club.
Sex work is a lucrative business for organized crime. Human beings cost less than drugs or firearms, and you can sell them not just once, but repeatedly, every day. Mariana Petersell is constantly out and about. Today she's looking for a girl that was trafficked to Germany, but is now said to be back in Romania. We leave the city of Timișoara and head out into the countryside.
I want to show you what it's like to grow up in a rural area here, so that you see how these children live in the countryside, these girls and women. So you can see how much pressure they're under and why they choose to become dependent on traffickers and agree to do these things and become a part of it.
Romania and Bulgaria are among the poorest countries in the European Union. In the countryside especially, the level of education is low and unemployment rates high. Women here in these rural areas have few prospects, and in some cases, that makes them easy prey for traffickers. The girl she's looking for is nowhere to be seen. Perhaps she's still in Germany after all. But Mariana Petersell won't give up, even though it often feels like a losing battle. Back in Germany, at the support center Amali, they're giving out food today. The women who come here all do sex work in the local area.
We've had stuff donated. You can take some with you if you want.
The women come from countries like Bulgaria, Romania, Albania and Moldova, Europe's poor houses. 90% of the sex workers in Germany are migrants. Many of them work illegally, have no apartment, no health insurance, and are not registered. Julia Vega has known some of them for years.
Here in
our neighborhood, we have a lot of women who work for extremely low prices. For some of them, it's still a lot of money, but they have to serve a huge number of clients. I've met some women who had up to 40 clients a day.
Cafes and bars normally serve as a place to make contact with clients, but even they are closed right now. Still, business can continue online. Sandra knows all the relevant platforms like Ladies, Sugar Daddy or Buy Me. Meetings are even arranged on Facebook or WhatsApp.
When you go on one of these platforms, some people will write to ask, "Can you visit me? Do you have Facebook or WhatsApp? Can I see pictures of you?" And when you ask what kind of pictures, they want to see you naked and things like that. You can then see who was interested in your photos. And either they then write to you or you write to them.
And so the sex work, and in many cases the exploitation, continues. There's not much the police can do, so they're changing tack, trying to get into conversation with the sex workers and win their trust, partly with the help of Amalie. The city's police chief comes to the center in person. Andreas Stenger spent years investigating cases of sexual exploitation and understands the issues. Together they hope to persuade more women to exit the trade. The pandemic is an opportunity.
I'm amazed that so many women are daring to quit now. We're currently helping 13 women who've realized they can't bear it anymore and want something new.
When we have women wanting to stop, who are also willing to talk about their experience, it's important to me that they know they can trust us. We need their testimony to get to the traffickers who are earning a fortune out of their misery. And Germany's Prostitution Act hasn't helped us.
Under German law, sex workers are considered service providers, just like nurses. Stenger says the change in law was well meant, but he too says that legalizing the trade has made it more difficult to catch the criminals. The two of them also agree that more focus needs to be placed on the role of the clients.
Obviously, they're partly to blame for the women's plight too. And we know that because the prices have plummeted, because of all the women coming from abroad whose services cost so little, anyone can afford it. I'm always amazed how many young men also use these services.
We need to move more towards the Scandinavian approach, where clients are prosecuted if they're known to have visited sex workers that were coerced into the job. They're called to account and face criminal charges.
In Sweden, paying for sex has been illegal for more than 20 years and has become increasingly unacceptable socially. The law there targets the clients, but not the sex workers. In Germany, on the other hand, sex work is legal and subject to social and health insurance contributions, just like any other job. That gives the impression of fair pay and protection for the workers. But in reality, 90% of the estimated 400,000 sex workers in Germany are not registered. Julia Vega has taken a stand against the sexual exploitation of women. Through Amali, she's built up a network that can free women from sexual slavery and offer them a new life, with a place to live and a job where they're not exploited.
I'm happy to get involved in areas where others prefer to look the other way. And when I see the women who've left the trade or those who come here with their children, there are so many wonderful moments that prove to me it's worthwhile working in this part of Mannheim and thinking every day of new ideas that I can put into practice, of how I can win over more supporters or make the best use of volunteers. We've been able to do a lot over the last few years.
Sascha and Ellie are just two of the beneficiaries. Thanks to Amalie, they've escaped a life of slavery. They'll never forget the trauma they experienced, but at least they have their dignity back.
People at Amalie have shown me that women have rights too. That you can fight back and that you can seek help from others. They made me strong by showing me that they stand with me and have my back.